The Astrology of Eyes Wide Shut, a film exploring the 8th and 12th houses. Appreciation for Stanley Kubrick's final film Eyes Wide Shut seems to grow with every passing year, as does the lore and mystery surrounding its embedded symbolism and meaning. It still holds the record for the longest continuous film shooting at 400 days, and according to Kubrick's brother-in-law and producer Jan Harlan, Stanley considered the film to be his greatest contribution to the art of cinema. He hadn't released a film in 12 years, so there was immense hype and high expectations, especially considering the star power of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, a married couple in real life, in the leading roles. Many film critics were underwhelmed, however, and even today the film stirs up strong opinions about its plot and the hidden messages that Stanley supposedly inserted into it. Making the situation even more intriguing and tragic is that Kubrick died of a heart attack just 6 days after showing the film to Warner Brothers executives. Was Kubrick killed for exposing elite sex rituals to a mass audience? Were scenes removed from the final cut? There are hundreds of videos and theories on this subject. Movie Geeks United created a fascinating series of interviews with Kubrick's assistant directors, the actors, set designers, choreographers, and assistants. And from these interviews, we can see that Kubrick's filmmaking process was highly collaborative, and he certainly allowed outside ideas to flow into his films. Eyes Wide Shut transmits many profound layers of information because Kubrick allowed his works to develop in a very naturalistic way. He had strong ideas about what he wanted, but he was always open to new ideas, and the script was constantly being rewritten, even while scenes were being shot. The actors were given a great amount of freedom as the story unfolded. For example, it took over a month to shoot the pool table scene between Tom Cruise and Sidney Pollack because they were constantly ruminating and reworking the script between one another. Shooting a simple scene 20 or 30 times was normal for Kubrick, and if an actor was having trouble and needing direction, he would often just say, "Give me the magic." As a film and theater director myself, giving an actor this kind of ambiguity is very risky, and it's very uncommon because of the time, energy, and the money it takes to be constantly reshooting scenes. The crew and actors can become exhausted very quickly, but Stanley would push each scene and explore every possibility in order to find the magic. What makes his films so special and unique, especially Eyes Wide Shut, is that he allowed them to take on a life of their own in a sense, and the result is a fascinating blend of elements that he deliberately inserted and elements that emerged from the creative process itself. It is my belief that all great works of art are channeled by the artist to a certain degree, and in Kubrick there was an equilibrium between having a very high IQ and a strong intuition and grasp of the mystical side of reality. But the primary aim of this presentation is to study Eyes Wide Shut from an astrological perspective and explore how the central themes in the film can tell us more about the experiences of the 8th and 12th houses in our individual lives. The 8th is the house of mystery, the occult, the taboo and forbidden, the psychological bond between two people, other people's resources, both their money and their vital energy, death, emotional security, and transformation. The 12th house is our dream life, secret pleasures, fantasies, drugs, sex, escaping the mundane, contemplation, and what we lose or must give up in order to achieve higher levels of knowledge and understanding. But don't worry, you won't need any background in astrology, as I will attempt to very simply lay out what these areas in the chart represent in our lives and how they're portrayed in the film. According to his daughter Vivian, Kubrick was a staunch advocate of science and allopathic medicine, and I am unsure of his stance on astrology as a practice, as I haven't heard him discuss it in any interviews. So in this presentation, I'm not going to be making any claims about any deliberate insertion of astrological concepts in any of his films. Rather, the houses in astrology are universal experiences, and so whether one believes in astrology or not, they are always playing out in our lives, and artists portray these universal experiences in their creations. The more you understand the houses, signs, and the planets, the more you'll see these concepts and archetypes in literature and in all of human creation. What I'm doing is relating the themes in the film into astrological language, and my goal is to show the veracity and truth of astrology as a science, as an intuitive process, and as a methodology to decode our underlying energetic reality. Eyes Wide Shut explores the idea that no dream is just a dream, and it's about the process of awakening to one's hidden worlds of fantasy, subconscious desires, and escaping the mundane. This awakening merges our dreams and waking lives into a more honest and fulfilling existence. In the appendix of this presentation, I'm going to discuss the hidden symbols that Kubrick supposedly inserted into the film that deepen the story's plot and themes, or whether these subtle clues were a result of artistic serendipity. Stanley bought the rights to Traumnovelle, or Dream Story, in 1968 when he was editing 2001: A Space Odyssey. The short novella was written in 1926 and translated into English in 1955, and Kubrick went on record saying he wanted to turn the novella into a film in 1972. However, he wasn't the first to adapt the novella into a film. This is an Austrian made-for-television movie released in 1969, directed by Wolfgang Gluck. Kubrick said that all of his films began with reading a book, so to better understand his vision, it's important to read the source material and look for what he keeps from the original story and what he adds or changes. This allows you to see what his vision for the story is and to find his unique signature on each of his films. For example, many plot points in The Shining deviate from the original novel, which angered the author Stephen King. When I first read Dream Story, I was surprised by how Eyes Wide Shut's basic narrative and themes are so similar to the original novella. While Eyes Wide Shut is rich in thematic layers, which we're going to carefully examine as we go along, the driving action of the plot is quite straightforward, especially when we look at it from the perspective of the 8th house in astrology. So first, what is the 8th house? The 8th is, first of all, the house where we explore the depths of our emotional security. This is considered the most difficult house because human beings are so complex and driven by urges that remain outside of the purview of our day-to-day thinking. A key word for the 8th is occult, or everything that is hidden, and diving into what is hidden within us is a naturally very difficult process because we uncover startling things about ourselves that maybe we didn't want to know or we wish would remain hidden. Our ability to grapple with these things determines how well we're able to become more consciously aware of our subconscious world. The 8th is thus the battleground of our psychology. Astrology itself is an 8th house activity because we're examining energy beyond our 5 material senses. In other words, the subtle forces that are hidden from our 5 material senses. One motivation for forming secret societies is to guard information related to these subtle forces so that they're not abused by people who they call the profane, or people who they believe are not mentally or spiritually capable of working with such important information. So much of Eyes Wide Shut's appeal is based on Bill's discovery of a secret society during his nighttime adventure. This surprising and even shocking scene is what inspired me to first write about the film in 2011, saying that Bill discovers an erotic underworld I think most people assume exists but would have no idea where to find it. In fact, I did not understand Kubrick as a filmmaker until I saw this scene, and it made me realize that there's so much more happening underneath the surface of his films. The more we dive into hidden worlds, the more we encounter unexpected things. And so the 8th house is the house of the unplanned and sudden changes in life, which are not always in our favor. Sudden changes can stir on compulsive behavior in an attempt to control what we're struggling to control, which is essentially our emotional responses and our behavior. Compulsive behavior can cause severe accidents and major breaks in life, which further makes the 8th such a difficult area of experience. Chronic diseases that slowly fester and are based on inherent flaws in our physical constitution, illnesses that are largely hidden until one day they aren't, are other unsettling realities in life. And so the 8th is our body's longevity and our relationship with the idea of death, the fact that our bodies will eventually decay and expire. The 7th house is the act of physical intercourse, and taking that to the next level is the 8th, which is the forming of a bond between two bodies during the act. So the 8th is the deeper emotional connection when two people share their resources with one another, and in the case of sex, the energetic resources of the body and its auric field. Thus, the 8th house is the house of other people's resources, which in its most literal expression is money and physical assets, such as inheritances, insurance payouts, and our partner's money. But as I just mentioned, it also pertains to the vital energetic sources of energy, called prana in Sanskrit, and how we interact with that energy in other people. The 8th is the house of taboos and committing crimes, things that violate the laws of society and codes of conduct. We'll explore exactly why this is a little later, but at the heart of a crime is the violation of another person's resources, or manipulating their resources, both their physical resources and their energetic resources. As you can see, the 8th can be such a mysterious realm of unexpected troubles and challenges, but the payoff is that the more we investigate these realms of our consciousness, the more we can transform ourselves to purify our dark sides when a part of us dies for another to be reborn, which allows us to become liberated on a spiritual level from the worries and pains inherent to our human psychology. In Vedic astrology, it's called a moksha house, or a house that is capable of producing profound realizations that free us from the limiting conceptions of ourselves. The narrative arc of Eyes Wide Shut is very straightforward when we realize that Bill is embarking on an adventure into his 8th house. When we meet him and his wife Alice, played by Nicole Kidman, we find they are a wealthy New York couple with a large, luxurious apartment we later find out is located on Central Park West, which is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Manhattan. The first 30 minutes of the film establishes who these people are: young, attractive, and prosperous. They attend a lavish Christmas party hosted by a man named Victor Ziegler. Bill is a doctor, and Ziegler is one of his patients to whom he makes private house calls. During the festivities, Bill and Alice are separately propositioned for sex by other attendees. These flirtatious encounters are the metaphorical knocking at the door of Bill and Alice's sexual lives, and other people want in. These interactions are what incites the dramatic tension of the film to begin. The following day, after their daily routines are just about complete, we find the family resting at home. On a personal side note, this is my favorite shot in the film because we find Bill sitting on the couch, drinking a beer and watching football, a relaxing but mindless activity. And little does he know what is in store for him this very night, the adventure that he is about to embark on. A little later, in their bedroom, the two smoke a joint, which acts as a kind of portal that opens up an important conversation about what happened at the party. Bill and Alice ask one another about who they were flirting with. Alice suspects that Bill left with the two women flanked at his side, but Bill was actually taken away and attended an overdose situation by a woman that Ziegler was engaged with upstairs. An argument about male and female sexual nature ensues, and Alice probes Bill about what he really thinks about female sexuality. Bill reveals that he knows very little about both females and Alice's inner world, and the sexual temptations she's experienced while being married to Bill. What Bill takes as a laughing fit from the marijuana is really Alice mocking his naivete, a kind of direct humiliation, which will come into play later on. When Alice recomposes herself and tells a story, this is the point in the film where Bill's emotional security is suddenly and unexpectedly shaken. Bill's emotional security and confidence in the stability of his marriage was based on what he thought was the fact that his wife would never be tempted to cheat on him. Much to his surprise, not only was Alice deeply tempted during a recent family vacation, but she was even willing to throw her entire life away and sacrifice her marriage, her family, and her future for one night with the proverbial attractive sailor in uniform. In the novella, it is also a naval officer whom the wife is tempted to engage with. Having shaken Bill's emotional sense of security, the film, and it seems fate itself, will now open up a new world for Bill to explore how to fill that void which suddenly appeared in the bond of his marriage. Each step Bill takes into his adventure turns into a more extreme experience to fill that void. The rattling conversation is interrupted by a phone call about a patient that has just died with whom he must visit. In the car ride downtown, Bill is immediately plagued by jealousy and dark fantasies of his wife cheating on him with the sailor. These fits of jealousy, repeated several times during his nightly adventure, is the root emotion which pushes Bill to seek out an adulterous sexual experience for himself. His first encounter is with Marion, whose wealthy father has just died and who is lying in a bed beside the two. She compulsively kisses Bill and reveals her obsessive love for him. Bill counters that she knows nothing about him, and yet she would rather live in the same city yet never see him than move out of state with her fiancé. This encounter also happens in the book and is somewhat vague towards how it moves the story forward. With the unnerving conversation with his wife fresh in his mind, the purpose of this scene is to further emphasize in Bill's mind that a woman's love is not as predictable as he believed. Marion, just like his wife, is more than willing to throw her stable relationship away for the sake of an attractive yet relatively unknown man. This further chips away at Bill's emotional security in relation to his marriage. And back on the cold New York street, Bill sees a couple making out, which stimulates another jealous vision. We've only seen him in luxurious settings, and this is the first time that he's in public. Right from the get-go, he has a run-in with a gang of frat boys who accuse him of being a closet homosexual. The confrontational and anti-gay attitude, with the insults that are made in very graphic language, insinuates that these guys have a repressed homosexuality themselves, which actually makes the scene darkly comical. These individuals are nowhere near beginning to contemplate a dive into their own 8th houses. But for Bill, it's a humiliating and disrespectful confront to his masculinity. Again, like the interlude with Marion, this scene doesn't move the plot forward in a clear way. Rather, its purpose is to stimulate a psychological response in Bill. The world around him is literally shoving him to the ground to get him to dive into his 8th house. In the novella Fridolin, the doctor character, who is Bill in Kubrick's version, is also confronted by a gang of young students. Their blue jackets indicate that they are, quote, Alemanians, meaning that they are Germanic. The author of the novella, Arthur Schnitzler, was Jewish, and so the scene in his story is meant to elicit an anti-Jewish tone against the main character. Kubrick changed this into a sex-related encounter, a change that reiterates the theme of exploring areas of subconscious sexual desire. Not a single other person passes by on this side of the street, which is very unusual for this area in Greenwich Village. This makes the scene very singular and surreal, very much dreamlike. The streets are charged with a devious sexuality at every turn, from the lingerie and sex shops to the open prostitution, which Bill pursues at his first opportunity. Her name is Domino, and it does seem that dominoes are falling, which metaphorically are the psychological layers being peeled back, which present Bill with new opportunities and doors of perception to open. The question is, how far does he want to go? Bill accepts the invitation for paid sex, but only on a certain level. During the business side of the interaction, Bill is vague and elusive, a man delightfully out of his comfort zone, and open to, quote, what she recommends. When it comes time to engage in the act itself, Domino kisses him, but Bill is stoic and doesn't move his facial expression and barely even moves his lips, as stiff as a mask. Bill is driven to fill the emotional gap in himself, and the physical act of sex appears secondary. The 8th house is the bond we form with another human being, and is most strongly obtained during sex, but not necessarily including sex. Alice calls Bill at this critical moment, and he wakes up to the reality of what he's doing, and he quickly leaves Domino's apartment while still paying her the amount he promised, much to her and his satisfaction. There are several occasions during the film where we see Bill being very liberal with money. His own resources are stable. It's other people's resources that he's looking to involve himself in. In the novella, Fridolin has the same kind of non-committal and unconsecrated rendezvous with a street prostitute. Kubrick cuts right back to Bill on the street, potential crisis averted. Deciding not to return home, Bill finds the jazz club his old medical school friend Nick Nightingale is playing at, who he ran into at the Christmas party. Much to his delight, Nick says that he'll be playing at a more exclusive gig later on, starting at 2 a.m. He describes the event with a great air of mystery, a place where he's never seen such women. The gleam of temptation is in Bill's eyes, and so being in the mood in which he's in, he insists that he attends the party, much to the reluctance of Nick. The password to the event is fidelio, which is the Latin word for fidelity, which is a mocking nod to the idea that fidelity will be maintained at the party, which is the preservation of a marital contract between two people. Here again is an important 8th house theme, the loss of fidelity. Why is the 8th house the loss of fidelity? Using a simple technique in Vedic astrology called bhavat bhavam, which means from house to house, we count from one house to another, and new significations to the house in question are revealed based on the numerology of the house's distances from one another. For example, the 9th house is the house of a marriage contract, and the 12th house is the house of loss. If we start at the 9th house and count 12 houses from the 9th, we arrive at the 8th house, which is thus the house of the loss of the 9th house. In other words, the 8th house is the house of a loss of a marriage contract. So not only is the 8th the strength of a deeper inner bond we can form with another person, it also signifies the cutting of external bonds and losing 9th house things. And some significations of the 9th house are our native culture, our ethical upbringing, and religious doctrines, and very importantly, the formal legal and spiritual contract we call marriage. This is why the 8th is the house of taboos, things cut off from what we've been taught as moral behavior. This doesn't mean just doing bad things. If someone is born and raised as a Satanist, their 8th house taboo would be becoming a Catholic, because it goes against their moral code and their upbringing. And although he has yet to actively engage in an adulterous, i.e. taboo act, Bill is playing with this double-edged sword of the 8th house. He is caught between severing his marital contract or reaffirming it, and has yet to decide on either one. To obtain the tuxedo, mask, and cloak needed to attend the secretive party, Bill enters a costume shop that burrows into the bottom floors of an apartment building, seeming to stretch deep underground. In the back room, a hidden tryst is taking place between the shop owner's adolescent daughter and two much older and well-spoken Japanese men. Wanting to just be in and out with his costume, this unexpected and unwanted turn of events is shocking to Bill, and yet another layer of devious sexuality is exposed to him, hidden away in the back room of the store. The young girl tempts Bill with another sexual opportunity, albeit much to his distaste. As his 8th house adventure continues to unfold, the more extreme and unusual the experiences are becoming, and the 8th house produces these kinds of extreme events and experiences. Very curiously, in both the novella and the film, the young girl says that Bill/Fridolin should have an ermine coat. She says it lower than a whisper, as inaudible as it could possibly be, but it appears in the subtitles. An ermine coat is made from the stoat animal, which is a little larger than a weasel, which has pure white fur and a black-tipped tail. These coats were the status quo of European royalty, especially during coronation events. Its inclusion in both the novella and the film is an allusion to the tastes of the highest echelons of society, a symbol of exclusivity and luxury. I think it's interesting that Kubrick includes the exact wording of depraved creature from the novella, also preserved in the 1969 film version. With jealous visions flooding his mind, Bill leaves the city and arrives at the secluded location of the party, again with the 8th house air of foreboding and secrecy. Giving the password and then driven up to the house, as the guards call it, which is really a castle, Bill is re-entering the world of opulence to which he is more accustomed. Entering and putting on his mask, in the main hall he walks into a ritual-like atmosphere which is already underway, and his late arrival alerts the attendees and the leader of the ceremony that this man may not actually belong there. When the women disrobe, the sacrilegious nature of the ceremony is revealed, a mockery of a Christian mass with Latin hymns sung in reverse, incense, and is all overseen by a red-cloaked priest, resembling the attire of a Catholic cardinal. This is the climax of Bill's journey into his 8th house. Not only is this world hidden from the public's eyes, but there is a decadent aspect where sex is impersonal, devoid of intimacy, and ritualistically mechanical. This is not the place where Bill can satisfy his urge for a deeper union with another human being. This is epitomized by the masked kiss he receives in the same passive manner as he did from Domino. The ritual is an inversion of a healthy and stable emotional world, what we can call a toxic 8th house. It highlights the difference between intimacy with a loved one and sex as a raw physical act. After the Christmas party, Bill and Alice are both seen naked in their bedroom and begin kissing, insinuating they're about to have sex as a loving married couple. The carnal acts of sex depicted at the ritual are the polar opposite of the sex portrayed in the marital bedroom, which is the way the film shows the two extreme attitudes of forming an emotional bond during sex. As soon as he walks away with the woman, Bill is warned of the dangerousness of the situation he's walked into. When people venture into the dark corners of their psyche, which in Bill's case has manifested into venturing into a dark corner of an elite secret society, choices carry much more pronounced consequences. Bill does not belong in this place. It is a physical, but it's also a psychic location where he has no experience, and he is immediately told that he must tread very carefully, and his life may even be at stake. The leader of the ceremony sets a trap, presumably to expose Bill, by sending a woman to ask him if he would like to go somewhere more private. Bill, in the same suggestive and non-committal manner as he was with Domino, accepts the invitation, but only on a superficial level, saying that might be a good idea. Just before they go, the same woman who warned Bill previously takes Bill aside and once again urges him to leave. Why is this woman attempting to save him? Bill is not allowed to know. Bill wants her to leave with him. It seems that he's moved by her gesture and looking out for his safety. But the situation is graver than he realizes, and breaking the ceremonial customs could cost both of them their lives. But time has already run out, and Bill is escorted to the main room under the guise that his taxi is waiting for him. There, the masked priest-like figure and many attendees form a circle around him. Bill is asked if he knows the second password, and upon revealing that he does not, he is ordered to remove his mask. Suddenly, the masked woman chooses to redeem Bill, accepting the consequences that may ensue, which appear to be grave considering that she's escorted away by a man whose mask resembles the Grim Reaper. Bill receives a final warning that if he reveals anything about this ceremony, he and his family will receive dire consequences. Upon leaving the ceremony, he takes not only his memories of the experience, but also the danger and potentially life-threatening consequences they entail. One cinematic technique that Kubrick was a master of was his cuts. A cut in a film is simply the moment you change between one image and the next. When used effectively, they move the narrative forward in clever ways, and most importantly, they create or dispel tension with the audience. The ability to control how you want the audience to feel through cuts is highly overlooked because there are so many of them in any given movie. Kubrick's most famous cut is from 2001: A Space Odyssey, when an ape man throws a bone in the air, and from that image the cut is to a new image thousands of years into the future, with a spaceship resembling the same bone. In a matter of seconds, we are shown how technology and tools advance while maintaining a singular function, which is to improve life, and is symbolized by the bone and the spaceship's nearly identical shape. One element of Kubrick's genius was his ability to pack so much visual information, philosophical concepts, and important aspects of the narrative into such a small window of time. The last shot of Bill in the ceremony, he is faced with the idea that a woman very well may be sacrificed on his behalf, and Kubrick cuts to Bill opening the door to his own apartment. This cut rapidly dispels the tension the audience feels for Bill in a matter of just a couple seconds. The 8th is the house of a volatile and abrupt changes in life, the situations that can make or break us. Bill quietly enters into his apartment just one frame after he's in the midst of being exposed and humiliated in front of dozens of potential enemies. Getting out of that situation alive is a stroke of good luck, albeit with a heavy price. But the cut deliberately emphasizes the abrupt change from danger to safety, which is a life experience of the 8th house, when suddenly things can go our way. The ritual scene works as the fulcrum of the movie, the first half of the film being the external experiences of the 8th house, Bill's physical journey, and the second half being the internal experiences, his psychological battle in dealing with what just happened. The previous night's events were so multifaceted, unusual, and intense that they almost seem unreal when compared to the casual hustle and bustle of the New York morning. Bill's perception of the world has dramatically changed in just the last few hours, and so he very naturally feels the need to investigate the circumstances to make more sense of what just happened, which is another key theme of the 8th house, the process of investigation and digging deep into things to uncover the truth. A strong 8th house is essential for becoming a detective, for example. The doors opened with such ease for Bill during his nighttime adventure, but now he is faced with an entirely different set of circumstances. First, the nightclub is closed, and Bill is told the pianist Nick was taken away with a black eye by two large, well-dressed and well-spoken men. Second, the costume shop owner, Milich, allows the two Japanese men to leave from the back room the next morning, where they clearly spent the entire night. Milich has pimped out his daughter rather shamelessly and even offers her to Bill, and Bill is disturbed and makes a comment about why the matter is not being handled by the police. In other words, the crime of underage sex trafficking is going unpunished. Bill then decides to visit the site of the ritual, but behind the cold blue gate, he only exacerbates the threat against him as an old and dour butler delivers a typed letter addressed directly to him, telling him to immediately cease and desist his futile inquest. Next, he calls Marion's house, and her fiancé Carl picks up. What would Bill possibly be able to gain from this interaction? Hanging up is easily the best move he could have made. In a last-ditch effort to savor at least some of the thrills from the previous night, Bill visits Domino's apartment with a gift, only to be told by her roommate that Domino had just received a positive blood test for AIDS that afternoon. As Bill goes on realizing he can no longer access the pleasures that were just at his fingertips, his investigation brings on more questions than definitive answers. This is a signal that he must instead look into himself. What are these events telling him about his own psychological and emotional security? The only door that quickly opens for him is a cafe, which he slips into after discovering that he's being followed by a sinister figure. Inside, he opens the New York Post and he reads about an overdose death by a former beauty queen. He immediately goes to the hospital on the suspicion that this may be the woman who redeemed him. The second door that opens for him is the door to the body platform at the morgue, and it is a turning point into his realizing the gravity of what and who he's dealing with. Was this the woman that redeemed him? All signs point to yes, as he stands face to face with death and the consequences of his treacherous adventure into the depths of his 8th house. The final door to be opened is the home of Ziegler, who wishes to speak to Bill immediately after he visits the hospital. Since Bill was being followed, the viewer can assume there may be a connection with Ziegler's interest in speaking with Bill after visiting the morgue, which is confirmed when Ziegler admits that, indeed, he had Bill followed. Bill is finally privy to some answers regarding to the situation that has been plaguing him the entire day. This is where he is informed that powerful people attended the ritual, people with public lives who have their own secretive world that Bill was not welcome to intrude into. Ziegler tells Bill that the redemption scenario was staged in order to scare him into not speaking to anyone about the situation. The idea that it was all an act seems like a bluff when Bill presents a newspaper article showing the overdose death, when Ziegler is forced to confirm that it was indeed the same person. But Ziegler is quick to respond that there was absolutely no foul play. The door was locked from the inside. The police are happy. The kind of phrasing someone says when they've successfully staged a death. Ziegler reiterates that the woman was a drug addict, which we know from her initial ODing in his bathroom at the Christmas party. Addiction is a key component of the eighth house because the overriding challenge of the eighth is to free oneself from what haunts us in the dark corners of our consciousness. By healthily exploring the eighth house, we are driven to transform subconscious desires into a more complete picture and elevated understanding of who we are, which leads to new opportunities previously unseen. An unhealthy exploration of the eighth house causes a person to be driven to temporarily free themselves from their problems by using mind-altering substances, which can lead to addiction. The woman was likely in a very unhappy state of mind, being a hooker, as Ziegler calls her, and sought pleasure and escape in hard drugs. The elite participants of the ritual also display addictive behavior, escaping into a castle to perform sexual acts they would be condemned for doing if they were doing it more openly. Their addiction isn't merely sex, but takes the form of thrill-seeking, committing deviant and taboo behavior to get a high, such as the mockery of the Christian Mass. By the end of this scene, Bill does not seem convinced, and it ends with his face lit by the cold blue of the outside window, the cold reality hitting him in the face. His actions did indeed cause the death of the woman, and the perpetrator is too powerful and connected to get justice. Bill's effort to get the truth in the world he discovers is futile, and there is no satisfaction being made available to him. This final climactic series of revelations is the closest Bill is going to get to understanding his adventure into his eighth house in a clear-cut manner. He's not going to find emotional security in the way he sought it, for all the paths he ventured down ended in further longing, violence, disease, and death. When Bill returns home, he finally breaks upon discovering his mask on his pillow. The mask was mysteriously missing from his rental bag when he returned to the costume shop. This is the final signal to him that he is truly out of his league, and he breaks down crying in front of Alice. Thus, Bill's journey into his emotional state of consciousness concludes by coming clean to his wife, a conversation that is held off-screen. The viewer has already taken the journey with Bill, including his very private, jealous visions, all of which he kept secret until now. As you can see, Bill's journey deals with the main elements of the eighth house experiences. He gets shaken up emotionally. He seeks to fill that emotional insecurity with secretive and taboo experiences, and eventually learns that the only way out of his predicament is to reveal himself to the person with whom he shares the deepest bond, his wife. The eighth house lesson that we can all learn from Eyes Wide Shut is that venturing into this area of our consciousness is emotionally difficult and will reveal troubling truths, not just about who we are and what we really feel deep down, but that there is a potential for major external changes in our life once we embark on this path into our eighth house. It is considered a difficult area in our chart because there are so many emotional ups and downs associated with it when we stare face to face with not only our physical death, but the spiritual death of the dark side of our psyche. Bill emerges successful because he is no longer attempting to repress his hidden urges. We will study the film's final scene after we study the world of dreams and fantasies, the world of the 12th house in astrology. It took 20 years for Arthur Schnitzler to complete Traumnovelle, and it took Stanley Kubrick 30 years to actualize his ambition to film the story. It took these two great artists so much time to complete these works, and they were both released at the end of their lives, because there is something very essential in this story in its relationship to human nature, and that is our dream life. The possibilities in a dream are by definition endless, which is why when you approach such a complicated and profound subject, you need to get it just right. Naming it Traumnovelle, which means dream story, tells us directly that it's dealing with the 12th house, which is our dream world. Eyes Wide Shut is a study of not just the 8th house journey into our subconscious emotional security, but also the relationship between our emotional security and our private dream life. There's a harmonious interplay between the 8th and 12th houses because they have a 120 and 240 degree distance from one another, which is called a trine in astrology. A trine produces a fluid and seamless relationship, and any planetary body or houses in this angular position creates an interaction characterized by clarity and ease. The 12th is the final house in our chart, and it's how things end, the final chapter, so to say, before a new cycle can begin, which is the first house. Just like the 8th house, it's also a moksha house, or a house that we use to become spiritually liberated. While the 8th house liberates us through a psychological battle with our dark side, the 12th liberates us through our ability for imagination. Both require us to discard aspects of ourselves or lose things in order to emerge stronger mentally and spiritually. Also, like the 8th, the 12th is a dusthana, which in Sanskrit means a difficult place, because losing things is not generally considered a good thing, but it doesn't have to be. Like the 8th, when we approach a difficult place with the attitude that it's for my ultimate benefit and psychological or spiritual growth, the difficulties these houses produce act more like blessings in disguise. So the core of the 12th house is our ability for imagination, and so it indicates our dream life, the fantasies that our consciousness swims in, both waking and during our hours of sleep. The 12th is very much a place of escape, where we go to find emotional comfort. This extends into the realms of faraway and foreign locations, the places of isolation, which include prisons, hospitals, monasteries, libraries, and retreat centers. Going to any of these places requires a kind of loss. In prison, we lose our freedom of movement. In hospitals, we have lost the freedom of optimal health, and so confine ourselves there to have it restored. Monasteries and retreat centers are places where material life is stripped of all but a devotional attitude, and often one loses the ability to speak, but more importantly, the loss of the ability to express desires that are not furthering a spiritual goal. And in libraries, we lose our daily concerns to immerse ourselves in the world of knowledge, which stimulates our imagination. These isolated places help us to contemplate with greater clarity. When we sleep, our dream world is a place where our mind is able to rest and explore without boundaries, which is a profound way for our consciousness to contemplate itself. Our dreams awaken us to our most essential desires, so the 12th represents those hidden desires, very similar to the 8th house. The 12th house also represents bed pleasures, because our bedrooms are isolated places where we can express the sexual desires brewing beneath the surface of our mundane life. Both the 8th and 12th houses represent drug use. In the 8th, drugs are a means to block ourselves from fully feeling the range of our inner emotional world, while in the 12th, drugs are a means to escape from our mundane reality. And finally, the 12th house rules the feet, or the foundation we stand upon, which means the totality of our understanding, or our inner standing, of who we are and the deeper meaning of our personal lives, as well as our understanding of the collective experience we call reality. Eyes Wide Shut is very much a film about the 12th house, as indicated by the fact that much of the action takes place in 12th house environments, places that are far away, foreign, or isolated. Bill's walk on the wild side takes him eventually to a completely foreign atmosphere at the ritual, where he has absolutely no experience. His journey then takes him to the most isolated place possible, the platform of a corpse deep in the bowels of a hospital's morgue. When Eyes Wide Shut was first released, it was criticized for its slow pacing. Its theatrical trailer portrayed the film more akin to an erotic sexual thriller. Audiences experienced a film that was far more careful and methodical, at a dreamlike pace, as is so often commented upon. So the 12th house experience of walking through a dream is how Kubrick wants the viewer to feel as they're watching the narrative unfold. Stanley's assistant director on Eyes Wide Shut was Brian W. Cook, who explained that as the film was being made, he felt it strayed from what he believed to be its original purpose.
The finished project, do you think it's the movie that he set out to make, that we have seen?
I felt we steered off the course. I always imagined the idea of the film was at the end, the audience, we weren't sure whether this whole thing had been a dream or was reality. And I think we went away from that with the storyline as we went along, you know? I mean, that was one of the things that most appealed to me at the end of the movie, that you weren't sure did this happen or didn't it happen? That was the sort of feeling of the book, I think. And we seem to have got sidetracked away from that at a tangent, I think, in many ways. I think as it goes along, it'll be, you know, quite a defining movie on marriage, to be honest with you. I mean, I personally liked it, but I mean, that was just my own thoughts on it, you know.
In a 1980 interview just after he completed The Shining, Kubrick explains the underlying sensation of The Shining, but this can also be seen in the dreamy atmosphere of Eyes Wide Shut. Freud, in his essay on the uncanny, wrote that the sense of the uncanny is the only emotion which is more powerfully expressed in art than in life, which I found very illuminating. It didn't help writing the screenplay, but I think it's an interesting insight into the genre. And I read an essay by the great master H.P. Lovecraft where he said that you should never attempt to explain what happens, as long as what happens stimulates people's imagination, their sense of the uncanny, their sense of anxiety and fear. As long as it doesn't, within itself, have any obvious inner contradictions, it is just a matter of, as it were, building on the imagination, imaginary ideas, surprises, etc., working in this area of feeling. This is in the context of horror films, but we can see the same sense of the uncanny and mysterious turning of events throughout Eyes Wide Shut. The film's lighting is where Kubrick plays with the contrast of dream life and real life. The warm reds elicit the comfort of fantasy, along with the dazzling white and multicolored Christmas lights, which give the sensation of the magical possibilities so much associated with the holiday season, like a fairy tale, and the cozy warmth when you escape the frigid temperatures outside. The stark blues are there to cool us off, to balance the ecstasy of holiday magic with the reality we wake up to every morning. The opposite house of the 12th house is the 6th house, which is the practical concrete world where we face problems and obstacles. This makes the 12th house everything that is the opposite of that, the world we escape from problems, our chance to imagine and live in an idealized version of our practical reality. This polarity is expressed in the pictorial language of the film, when on one hand we have the public display of Christmas-themed lighting appearing in almost every scene throughout the film. This lighting symbolizes the illusion. However, during the most dramatic and consequential scene in the ritual, there is no trace of the Christmas spirit. While moody and dynamic in the interior rooms, the lighting is cold and white within the central chamber. This lighting symbolizes the reality of how the world really is. This is where powerful people congregate, the politicians, celebrities, and industrialists, the names of people Ziegler won't reveal to Bill. They live and govern the public by a different set of rules, a different reality altogether. These important lighting choices emphasize this contrast between fantasy and reality. The Christmas lights emote the dream, while the white, stark lighting reveals the reality behind the curtain. The 12th house theme here is that what we fantasize about how reality is has no obligation to be true at all. In fact, self-deception, a characteristic of an unhealthy 12th house, is what led Bill down this lonely and dangerous road. He may have discovered how the elite conduct themselves behind closed doors, but the disconnect between his real life and his fantasy only grew, which is a telltale sign of an unhealthy 12th house. When our dreams and ideals sync up with our practical, on-the-ground experience in life, our 12th house is healthy. We aren't being tantalized by what could be, what ecstatic yet temporary pleasures we can indulge in now that we have a bit more power at our fingertips. A healthy 12th house requires that we don't get lost in our mental world where anything is technically possible. Grounding ourselves is the solution to this, and not allowing ourselves to get carried away. Upon returning home from his night-long odyssey, Bill finds his wife laughing in bed in the midst of a dream. Upon awakening, she is distraught and on the verge of tears. Bill is still shaken from the night's events and insists that she describe what happened in her dream in a mood that says, "I've already seen it all, and at this point nothing would surprise me." As Alice begins to tell the story of her dream, what's initially startling and obvious is its biblical quality, specifically the Genesis tale of Adam and Eve after they've eaten the forbidden fruit. She describes the couple in a deserted city, and that she feels ashamed that her and Bill are naked, and so he rushes off to find clothes for them. Upon leaving, she feels liberated and exuberant. She is then approached by the very naval officer that sparked the fits of jealousy in Bill. They begin making love, and she says that she feels wonderful knowing that Bill is watching. Furthermore, she is surrounded by many hundreds of other people, all having sex, and she is having sex with many men, desiring to ridicule and humiliate Bill as she does so. This harkens back to her waking life ridicule of Bill's naivete when they were having their initial conversation about her secret desire for the sailor. In the novella, Albertine, who is the wife character, Alice in Eyes Wide Shut, describes her dream to her husband when he returns from the ritual, and she says that she's approached and courted by the man she also had secret desires for. But she does not explicitly remember if she has sex with him in the dream. However, her pleasure at the idea of abandoning and humiliating her husband, Fridolin, is just the same as Alice's. In Eyes Wide Shut, not only does Alice make love to the sailor, but she has sex with many other men, as if she herself was playing the role of one of the women at the ritual Bill just attended. In both the novella and film, Alice's dream shows us that her subconscious world is connected to Bill's, because when she experiences and then describes her dream, she has no idea what Bill has been up to all night, and yet she's feeling the same emotional palette that Bill has been experiencing, namely of promiscuity and betrayal. In the same way as the film's lighting juxtaposes fantasy and reality, Bill's nightly adventure and Alice's dream juxtapose one another as another 12th house theme, how the waking consciousness is mirrored back to us in our dreams. Where we go mentally during the day and what we daydream about is explored in greater depth and strangeness as we sleep. When we enter the 12th house, especially in dreams, we lose the temporal and physical restraints of material life. Our mind loses inhibition and new layers of psychic understanding emerge. Alice's dream reveals a loss of modesty, a loss of respect for her husband Bill, and as her consciousness is revealed to herself, she is terrified by what lies within her. Yet by expressing them to Bill, it gives Bill the chance to do the same, to reveal the truth of what is happening within his inner world, which he eventually does. The film's final scene is the first scene the family is seen in a public place. Everything is now out in the open, after all secrets have been revealed. While it is not an emotionally charged or excessively dramatic scene, it may be the most important scene in the film because the couple has emerged from their difficult places, the 8th and 12th houses, with greater understanding of their inner worlds. In the language of these two astrological houses, they have achieved a stage of moksha, the Sanskrit term for liberation, because they face the obstacles related to their marriage and jointly decide to be truthful and faithful to one another. Asked what they should do, Alice responds, "Be grateful that we managed to survive both the real and unreal adventures, and that a single night does not reveal the whole truth of one's experience." When Bill remarks that no dream is ever just a dream, a line directly taken from Dream Story, it's a powerful statement that says that what lies dormant within us reveals important truths about who we really are. That our waking and sleeping dreams are connected further links the 12th house of our dreams and fantasies and the 8th house of hidden worlds that serve as the bedrock of our emotional security. Alice says we're awake now, and with that the two have transformed their difficulties and established an even stronger psychological bond between them. Will it last forever? That is not for them to decide, because the present moment is all that is ever guaranteed. It is a kind of quiet but powerful triumph for the two because The temptations and desires that troubled their marriage were overcome. What Eyes Wide Shut teaches us about the 8th and 12th houses is that the difficulties these houses put us through must be faced with honesty and courage. Bill embarks on a perilous adventure and narrowly escapes disease and death, while Alice fantasizes about cheating on her husband and humiliating him. Yet both never fully commit to realizing these desires, which is what ends up saving their relationship. Neither sweeps these urges under the rug, but rather they explore them, which tells us that we must accept that there are hidden areas in our consciousness, and by honestly exploring them and their consequences, we can transform them and emerge on the other side with a greater depth of self-understanding. Hidden messages or artistic serendipity, you decide. The mise-en-scène in Kubrick's films is what makes people re-watch them over and over, looking for new clues and subtle messaging. Mise-en-scène is a term in film that means everything in the scene or every element within the frame which serves as information for the viewer to read into. The mise-en-scène is the art direction, costume design, set design, lighting design, colors, props, locations, and the physical action, essentially everything except for spoken words. The more haphazard a director is with the mise-en-scène, the more amateur the film will appear, and unimportant information can then distract the viewer from the essential message of the story and what the director or writer is trying to say. But the more control you have over every element in the scene, the better you can deliver key messages and themes without having to express them verbally. If you want to say something controversial without risking censorship, and if you want to instill your message onto the subconsciousness of the audience, articulating the mise-en-scène is how you do it. This has been the bread and butter of the advertising industry for nearly 100 years. As I stated in the introduction, Eyes Wide Shut is just like Kubrick's other films in that it utilizes mise-en-scène to convey profound information that he didn't want to say outright. But are there elements that were not necessarily purposeful yet fit eloquently into the overall message of the story? Here are a few examples I found that are sometimes mentioned in other film analysis of Eyes Wide Shut, and others that I'm mentioning here for the first time as far as I'm aware. Let's see if they may have been purposeful or are a result of artistic serendipity. If the artist doesn't tell us either way, it's up for the viewer to decide. The women in the ritual are perhaps the most enigmatic story element in Eyes Wide Shut. Who are these women, and how did they find themselves in this situation? The subtle clues and symbols throughout the film repeatedly point back to these women as an important component of the overall narrative. The tiger on Domino's bed is the same exact tiger on the shelf in the toy store. There are absolutely no mainstream sources online about what is known as beta sex kitten programming, which states that young girls are trained from an early age to become sexualized by using leopard, tiger, and cat imagery. The fact that this alleged technique is not disclosed by any official source, such as documentation in leaked or declassified CIA documents about their disclosed mind control programs, which stretch back many decades, tells us that this sexualizing technique is still a trade secret, as it were. Even if it is completely coincidental that so many famous celebrities are sexualized using cat imagery, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Was Kubrick aware of this alleged method? I'll let you decide. The modeling industry is mentioned twice in the film, once directly and a second time very subtly. The first instance is at the Christmas party, when two models are propositioning Bill to go where the rainbow ends, an enticement for a threesome. One of these models tells him how they had previously met him at one of her photo shoots at Rockefeller Center, and he treated her very gentlemanly by giving her a handkerchief when something got stuck in her eye. The other model's last name is Windsor, and the House of Windsor is the name of the current royal family in England. In the book and the 1969 film version of Trome Novelle, the woman who turns up dead as the sacrificial victim may have been a baroness or higher, and whether or not she was is deliberately left vague by Schnitzler. The novella and Kubrick's film both link high-pedigreed women with being sexual objects. Who invited these models to Ziegler's party? They fit the approximate body type of women at the ritual. Are they attendees at both parties, looking to sexually gratify guests at both? The second mention of models is where Bill reads the newspaper article about the overdose death of a, quote, ex-beauty queen. There is a typo in the article where a paragraph is repeated. The repeated line is, quote, she has many important friends in the fashion and entertainment worlds, unquote. In my opinion, I don't think it is likely this typo was by accident, knowing Kubrick's reputation as a perfectionist. Later in the article, it says the former model and beauty pageant winner was hired by a London fashion designer, Leon Vitali, which is the real name of Kubrick's right-hand man and assistant for many years. The article goes on to say that the now-deceased model was, quote, adored by the fashion designer, not for how she wore his stunning clothes in public, but for how she wowed him by taking them off in private, seductive solo performances, unquote. Interestingly, Leon Vitali, Kubrick's real-life assistant mentioned in the article, is the actor playing the priest figure at the ceremony, called Red Cloak in the credits. Playing the priest at the ritual and having his name mentioned in the article, are these clues telling us that the fictional London fashion designer is the priest at the ceremony? A man with that kind of power in this specific industry would have access to such women. Is this an indictment by Kubrick of the fashion and modeling industry as a portal into debauchery and sexual deviance? A little research on the internet will reveal that models find themselves in compromised situations with their bosses very often and are often the victims of abuse. Was Kubrick also saying this? I'll let you decide. The white orb lights on the tables in the jazz club resemble pearls and also crystal balls. Is there something more to them? Perhaps, since earlier we see Mandy just after her overdose wearing a white orb ring. Later, when Alice is explaining her dream to Bill, she is wearing white orb earrings. And as Ziegler just begins to come clean to Bill, we see him fiddling with the cue ball on the pool table, another white orb. I can only speculate as to what these white orbs could mean if they are purposeful, but what it is doing is connecting the location of Bill's first hearing about the ritual, the sacrificial victim, and his wife's dream of having sex with many men, just like the women at the ritual from where Bill just returned from. And finally, the white orb symbol connects the man who appears to be the ringleader of the ritual, which we'll get to shortly. If Kubrick didn't insert the white orbs deliberately, they are artistically serendipitous because they add an intriguing layer of symbolism connecting these women and Ziegler into Bill's life. Ziegler is the host of the Christmas party, and there is contextual evidence that he also hosted the second party the following night, the ritual. Ziegler tells Bill, quote, I was there, but was he the man presiding over the ceremony from the balcony? That man is wearing a triangle hat. In Ziegler's library, there is a portrait of a man holding a similar triangle hat. This prominent portrait is presumably a member of Ziegler's family lineage. So are these types of rituals a part of an elite custom passed down through the generations, symbolized by using the same triangle hat? I encourage you to watch the film Room 237, a documentary about the clues Kubrick allegedly put into The Shining, and some of the theories in it are more than convincing. With this background, you'll learn that Kubrick is certainly capable of a high level of subtlety in his mise-en-scène. Does connecting Ziegler's family portrait with the ritual leader's triangle hat reveal a deeper and darker current of elite behavior, or is this simply artistically serendipitous? If it was deliberate, it is nothing less than masterful. If it is simply serendipitous, it would make this symbol accidental, yet a profound message in the film, a stroke of genius by a mystical source. Again, I'll let you decide. As I mentioned earlier, when Alice describes her dream to Bill, The biblical tale of Adam and Eve being expelled from the Garden of Eden is implicit within it. Bill and Alice's apartment is sprawling with large paintings with features of a lush garden. While this is not necessarily a hidden symbol, it is an excellent thematic connection between Bill and Alice's ordeal with Adam and Eve's ordeal, namely the breaking of a promise, the promise of faithfulness in a marriage, and the breaking of the promise to God not to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In actuality, these were the paintings of Kubrick's wife, Christine. Again, did Kubrick choose his wife's paintings as a deliberate way to juxtapose the blissful life in the Garden of Eden to Bill and Alice's apartment? Or, as some of his collaborators have commented, it was simply an easy way to save money on the production budget? In either case, it adds a layer of mythological importance to the age-old subject of marital fidelity. Finally, we have the scene at the morgue where Bill stands face to face with a dead body. Above his head is the number 19. Again, knowing Kubrick's work, he doesn't leave these larger details up to chance. In numerology, 1 represents births or beginnings, and 9 is death or endings, because they are the first and last numbers. When put together, they symbolize the cycle of birth and death, and it appears recurrently during events that happen on a worldwide scale. Bill, staring face to face with death, with 19 over his head, wakes Bill up to the profundity of his actions, their life and death consequences, and a deeper understanding being birthed in his consciousness.